and I thought I had a pretty good understanding of it, but after trying to draw it, I realized that I needed to spend quite a bit more time. Hey friends, Bart here, and I am super excited today because I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the artwork that I recently got to hang at a show here in Asheville. Now, if you've spent any time kind of hanging out and checking out some of my videos out there, you know that I'm really into communication. And I think that there's, a lot of different ways to communicate. Art is one of the ways. Writing, poetry, prose, spoken words, another way. You've got, of course, music. It's this other great communicational tool. And I think it's been kind of interesting for me over the years to realize that none of these formats is perfect. There's always some sort of shortcoming in what we can express using these different formats. And I think that's kind of why I've been into so many different types of formats. I find all of them have their own strong points. And so for me, this most recent show that I hung is all about that overlap of my interests, where the artwork and my love of presenting images and trying to instill a sense of feeling and movement and just kind of an emotion behind a picture, and musical instruments and the music that we can create with them, of course. So this most recent series has been titled Schematics, and it's all about the physical construction and kind of the design of some of the most beloved music instruments of all time. And it's just the beginning. I'm going to keep working on this series over the years to come. But it really kind of, again, stems from two things. First, my love of instruments, and then I love tools too. So these designs are supposed to kind of show us some of what I think about when I pick up an instrument. When I grab a guitar and I see the electronics in there and the pickups, or I see the bridge and the tuning mechanisms, all of those cool little pieces of engineering individually have super interesting stories. Well, I think they're pretty interesting. Super interesting stories that go back through a shared history of that instrument. When you look at something like a violin or a fiddle that's been around for hundreds of years, there's been a lot of different thought put into different pieces of it, and what we know as a modern version of those instruments is often a culmination of a lot of those efforts coming together. I also play flute, and when I look at the fingering and the mechanisms that these instruments have on them, the whole thing just blows my mind. I think that instruments are some of the most interesting things that humans have cleverly ever created. And so this series is all about celebrating the design of musical instruments. And so what I've done is I've gone through and I've pulled schematics and diagrams out of patents that I've found. I've pulled them out of library books that I've used, books that I've used to build my own guitars and instruments over the years. I've always loved looking at technical diagrams, and they show the exploded pieces and the screws fly out and all the washers are there, and they show how everything connects together. Really cool stuff. I think it's interesting imagery, and it's also, of course, has this storytelling aspect behind how these machines work. And I think that part is just as interesting as, hopefully looking at some of the pictures here. So as you kind of cruise through this series, you can see that I've covered woodwind instruments. There's brass instruments in here as well. I even have percussion instruments like the piano. The piano hammer was a really cool one. When I first found that one, I spent probably, an hour at least staring at it and trying to map out what happens as you move each one. And that one's particularly interested because piano keys on many keys are weighted. So there's this double action piece where there's weight that pulls it back up after you've depressed the key. So that's part of how you get that little bit of resistance and feedback. It feels simple when you're playing the keys, but when you look at the mechanism that drives that under the hood, again, mind is blown. It's something that for me, I cannot get enough of trying to understand the story behind these instruments. And I'm just, even after all this time loving them and drawing them, I still find myself challenged. When I worked on the saxophone, for this particular one, I was kind of like really floored by how complex all of the armatures that were on there. And I thought I had a pretty good understanding of it, but after trying to draw it, I realized that I needed to spend quite a bit more time. And even in some of these pictures, I often will kind of fudge it or fuzz it a little bit in some areas because I don't know exactly how every single little mechanism works. And it's kind of hard for me to leave them in there because I want them to be as accurate as possible. I want an instrument manufacturer to come and say, yeah, that's right. That valve angle looks pretty good right there. I really hope you enjoy it. You can also find me online at bartcastle.com and here on our YouTube page, /C/BartCastle. Make sure that you subscribe and check back often, my friends. Be creative, have fun out there, and make sure that you're handling that work-life balance, and I'll see you in the cloud.